Kyle.
Well, I'm always down for that because no one likes Kyle.
Oh, he's the worst.
Worst. And welcome to the Down in Front podcast, the official podcast of downinfrontpodcast.com. I am your host, Warren, and here what we do is that we review movies, TV shows, sometimes video games, anything and everything to social media and media on the screen, on the small screens, even like Black Mirrors. So we're excited. We're pumped. Tonight, we're going to be doing a huge new review by Tully, by director Jason Reitman, starring Charlize Theron, Mackenzie Davis, Ron Livingston, and a bunch of other small character roles. So I'm super pumped because this movie, I think, is going to go down, and a lot of people are going to be talking about this movie a lot more. So I'm pretty pumped to actually kind of unpack this. But before we get to all the nitty gritty, we normally go through and talks about, what we've been sipping on and other things that we've been watching before we get to our full review. So I'm going to toss it over to my best friend. He is finally back from his way. Man, he looks super tan. I wish you can see him right now. This man's been looking gorgeous. The mouth of the South. Rylan, how's it going, man? Welcome back.
Thank you. It's awesome. It's great to be back in the East Coast. What I've been drinking, what I'm drinking right now, is I'm finishing off a 4-month-old bottle of whiskey I left over before I left for California. So this is Amador whiskey, double-barreled. I'm drinking it neat because my ice hasn't frozen yet. So it's nice. It's smooth. I like it. It's got a really cool label. I'll show it to you.
Oh, nice. Double barrel whiskey company. Looks fancy. And from Napa Valley. Look at you.
Yeah, it's a Kentucky bourbon that's been cast in Napa Valley wine barrels. So it's got a unique flavor to it.
Ain't you fancy?
I dug it. But what I've been watching recently, to prepare myself for Tully, I decided to watch Young Adult, which was the first collaboration between Charlize Theron, Diablo Cody, and Jason Reitman. And I either didn't enjoy this movie or don't get the point of it. So it's I found it to be a movie that they lead you to think that the character's going to learn a big lesson and then nothing happens. And it's just one of those movies that just ends, which you're just left up to think about on your own terms what you think the character's going to do next. But there are some good performances, especially Patton Oswalt is in it. And he plays a character that I just haven't seen in another movie before, where he's been through some traumatic times, but he's still going about his life. And it's cool to see like that character that even though he should have a chip on his shoulder, he finds a way to get around that and still lead a solid life, even though there are people that try to bring the badness out again and get him to kind of like dwell on the bad things that happened to him. But amazing performance. He becomes like the voice of conscience for Charlize Theron's character in the movie. I think it's worth watching. It's on Amazon Prime right now. I don't think it's for everybody. It's a very unique story that I think will speak to only a certain audience.
Got it. Cool.
The other thing I'll mention is I watched a Netflix original movie called Anon, which is a sci-fi film starring Clive Owen and Amanda Seyfried. And I dug this movie. I think it's really cool, especially the aesthetic of it. Like cyberpunk's really big right now, so it has this very dark, minimalistic, clean look to it. And it's kind of like they're trying to tell a Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy type of espionage thriller in a society where everybody's connected. So it's kind of like, how do you solve a murder when everybody's connected? Which was an interesting concept they have in it, and I wish they played more into that in the movie. But it's still worth watching. There's some really cool aesthetics, how the UI for everybody's augmented reality vision is just full of data, and it's very clean and minimalistic, which I really enjoyed. I really want to go back and watch the movie and like pause because you'll see these little dossiers next to everybody's face when someone's looking at them. That's actually like written like script of something about that person. So I think it'd be neat to go back and just read all those different things.
Very cool.
Yep.
So we got Young Adult that was on Amazon Prime and Anon that was on Netflix. Thanks, Brylan, for coming on, and thank you for hanging out with us again, as you always are. Yeah. I'm going to toss it over to one of my best friends. Not as cool as Brylan, but he's all right. Mike the Shredder, rocking the sick playoff beard, looking like Marcus Morris. Whew, there we go. I got it out there.
If you called him Markeef, he was going to have words with you.
Yeah. They look the same, and that's not racist. It was twins. How you been? What you been sipping on, and what you drinking?
I'm fantastic. Today's a weird day. I looked at my fridge, and I bought a nice little 4-pack of IPAs specifically for tonight, and I wasn't having any of it, so I'm drinking water. I literally was like, nah, I can't.
Can't do it.
I had a beer for lunch, and it's like, no, not for me tonight.
Just the beer for lunch?
Well, I had a burger. Calories? I had a burger too. Yeah, so no cutting calories, and I had muffins. Later. It's all about the muffins.
Muffins.
But yeah, so some good old spring water. Glorious. As we get older, I think we're gonna unpack this later. We start to mature. And we can't do the things we used to do as youngins. Anyways, what I've been watching, I actually did start watching something.
Say what?
I know. I started watching Evil Genius because it's 4 episodes long, and it is clearly Netflix is trying to like do the whole like what makes a murderer thing again, and like they're trying to strike gold a second time, and so it's like pretty much the exact same thing. The premise is way more interesting, and then it just gets super boring after that. Like, they clearly did not have, at least they haven't gotten far enough. They didn't have enough material, and they're just totally stretching it. So the premise, I'll give you the premise. That's the one
with the nuns?
No, well, not yet, maybe. I don't know. All so right. It's this dude.
Spoiler.
Yeah, right. This dude robs a bank, and he has a collar wrapped around his neck. He robs a bank with a cane gun, too. Like that, what a weird weapon for that. They haven't explained where that one comes from, but he's wearing this collar around his neck, and it has an explosive like right on his chest. And so he like talks to the police because obviously they pull him over. And apparently he was in the middle, like someone abducted him, strapped this thing on him, and then gave him a treasure hunt to find the keys to unlock it. It's like literally. Dr. Rob, if you're out there, cover your ears. But it's literally like a game of Saw. But yeah, no, this dude got exploded in the middle of the road. The cops handcuffed him, put him on the ground, until they could figure out what was going on. And like, I guess the timer ran out, and he like literally detonated on like in Erie, Pennsylvania. It wasn't that bad, but it was like. They definitely blanked it out when the whole bomb went off. But yeah, so it's about like this whole murder mystery, and it's like kind of centered around this girl. But like, I don't know, it's not as interesting as Making a Murder because there's no secondary suspects, and there's no believability that in the end the people that they've spotlight like didn't do it. Part of the great part about Making a Murder was that you could have equal amount of people saying he didn't do it. An equal amount of people being like, yes, he definitely did. And this, like, they haven't presented enough evidence to be like, well, that he didn't do it or she didn't do it. So that's what, I don't know. I'll probably finish it because the premise is so interesting, but it's not that great.
It seems like you have a lot on your plate there for picking up a show that you kind of sort of didn't like you like, but now you just want to stick through it. Well, it's only 4 episodes. That's not bad.
Yeah, I put it on after watching Drugs Incorporated. This is my new. I don't know why I'm doing this to myself, but whenever I take a nap, I have this thing where I can't like fall asleep to something I actually want to watch and engage in because then I like think subconsciously I'm ruining it for myself when I eventually wake up and have to go back. So I literally just, I don't know why, I put on this A&E documentary, I think, called Drugs Incorporated, which is awful. It's like you fall asleep to crack whores and then you wake up an hour later, or let's be honest, 2 hours later, it's just some heroin addict. It's like, not the greatest thing to be sleeping to.
Yeah.
Gigolos.
Yeah, but it's, I don't know. I can't fall asleep to like series of unfortunate events because I'll wake up mid-song 6 episodes later and be like, what happened?
What happened? Yeah. You can fall asleep to Paddington because those movies are terrible. So there you go.
I've never seen them, so I can't rebuff that.
I know. I mean, it's the perfect movie to fall asleep to because it's just like light and you literally don't have to pay attention. If you do wake up, you're like, oh, I'm pretty sure I can get there without watching anything. So there you go. Well, as always, it is great to see your face. It is great to have your voice on this night's podcast. And you said you watched Evil Genius where on A&E?
No, it's Netflix original.
Netflix. And I am Warren. I will be your host for this evening. I am currently sipping on a old, not really a classic, but I've had this before. This is called Dark Horse Double Down. So red wine, red blend. It is quite phenomenal. I would say it's probably as close to Apothic Dark. I know you've definitely had that one, Brylan. Brylan, have you had this one?
I've had Apothic Dark. I haven't had this Double Down.
Okay, the Double Down is really good. It's like a limited release, they say, but it's been out for like 8 months, so I'm pretty sure it's gonna be here to stay. Let's be honest.
Gmail's still in beta.
Exactly right. Yeah, it's always beta because if something goes wrong, then they can't blame us. But it's really good, so definitely go check this out. It's Dark Horse Double Down. And what I've been watching a bunch of things, but I actually got a chance around to watching Girls Trip. Have you guys seen this movie? I watched it on HBO now.
I have not.
No. Okay. So the movie is very fun. I think the premise is basically a bunch of grown-up women go out and they go to New Orleans to have like this girls trip in which they can just go let loose and be like they were themselves in our college. But a bunch of things obviously goes wrong and some hilarity ensues. Jada Pinkett Smith's in it. Regina King, I believe, is in it. Queen Latifah's in it. And oh crap, I forgot her name. She's like super famous now. She's
Taraji P. Henson?
No.
Tiffany Haddish?
Yes, thank you.
There we go. It was one of those two.
Yeah, one of those two. Yeah. So the movie was very silly, very, very silly. It was very odd because this movie came out, I think maybe last year, maybe the year before. But all the performances in the movie, like all the people that were performing, were all from like 80s and like late 80s, early 90s, maybe 2000s, like R&B and like rap and stuff. So although this movie was from last year, all the actual performers were actually performing in this place in New Orleans. And so I definitely think that this movie was catered to like people from that time frame who knew, because I actually knew just about everybody who's performing. I was like, oh, I haven't seen this person in years. I didn't think this person was still alive. Oh, that's pretty cool.
Brian McKnight.
Exactly. He was in the movie. He even had Maxwell in this movie. I was like, oh my gosh, why is Maxwell here? That's weird. So I thought that was kind of funny. They definitely know like their target audience. But the movie itself like went pretty well. And I think at one point this movie made a bunch of money last year and people didn't even realize because of the other movie that was basically the white version called Rough Night came out, I think, a weekend or 2 weekends after, and that one bombed in the theaters last year. So that was kind of funny. But definitely go check out Girls Trip if you just want a nice comedy. Oh, like Blue, you can fall asleep to Girls Trip. It's fine.
Okay, I'll check it out.
It's perfect.
So is it like a blend of like clever humor and gross out humor like Bridesmaids, or is it something else?
Oh, it's not much clever humor. It's more of like in your face sort of slapstick humor, and then like there's some like gross out humor in parts, but it's kind of funny. There was this one moment that Tiffany Haddish character explains the grapefruit.
Oh Jesus!
Friend of the show, the grapefruit.
Yeah. And so the person I was watching with was not familiar with the concept, and I just could not stop laughing.
Who'd you watch it with?
It was a entire time. Huh?
Who'd you watch it with?
My friend. So it's very exciting. It was very cool. My friend. I would definitely go check out Girls Trip. It's on HBO right now. It's very fun. It's very bubbly. Like, I would say it's a movie that you kind of sort of have to talk through, because you kind of like get like more of the jokes and makes it more funny. And it has a little bit of substance. But Michael Coulter, right?
Yeah.
Luke Cage.
Yeah,
Luke Cage is in it. So yeah,
Nice.
that's fun that he's in that movie.
He
Although
needs to do more stuff.
Yeah, he was in the movie for like a little bit. So I was like, but you're like a good dude. You're playing like a bad dude in this movie. Huh? So that's a bummer. But yeah, that's what I've been watching. And that's what I'm drinking. So we're pumped. I'm excited to actually talk about this movie. We can chat about it for a little bit, but then we're going to take a break, just so that the next segment after our break, we're going to be getting to everything and anything about this movie with all the spoilers contained. So definitely stay tuned for that. But I do want to talk about a little bit more of Jason Reitman's films. I know, Briley, you had talked about this. I actually have never seen any of his films before. And so what I'm going to be able to do is talk about that. You said something about Thank You for Smoking. And what was the other film that he
Up in the Air.
Up in the Air. Okay.
Yeah.
So definitely talk to me about like some of the Jason Reitman's films before we kind of get into it, of the full review of Tully.
Yeah, so it looks like I've seen pretty much all of Jason Reitman's films. So definitely the one that stands out to me the most is Up in the Air. I think it's a really amazing character study of a guy that has a thankless job, but he kind of has to find a way to tolerate the job, but also find purpose in his life. And they have this really cool metaphor of, can you fit your life in a backpack? Because he's traveling through airports constantly. His job takes him to a different state, different city every single day. And I found it to be a really, really interesting character piece. And that's what Jason Reitman's pretty much good at. He also did Juno, which was Diablo Cody's first written film, which I didn't really like the dialogue, but it had some interesting premises, was well shot. I mean, Jason Reitman learned from his dad, who was one of the best filmmakers of the 80s. But I think, especially looking at these three movies where he's working with Diablo Cody, either they helped each other mature, or, I mean, Diablo Cody's definitely had a lot of maturity in her dialogue, because you can see that it goes from this very super overly pretentious dialogue in Juno, some a little bit more realistic in Young Adult, but still kind of pretentious for the right reasons, like for someone dealing with being immature, but still being an adult that has to find ways of growing. But in Tully, I think it's really exceptional how realized the dialogue is. And so it's really cool to see that journey happen through his career, his films. But I really enjoyed what he does. He's done smaller films than what his dad did. And I think that has helped him like kind of find his own niche and find his own voice as a filmmaker.
Nice. It's nice to see that you have a lot of these pieces of work that you can see the actor or the actress or the director or the writer. You can see them growing in their work, and you see bits and pieces of some of their previous works and how one thing may have worked, but other things may have not. And so things that they choose to omit and things that they choose to add to it. And so it makes it more like a better cinematic performance. So I think that's actually pretty cool. Blewett, did you have any information from, did you know anything about Jason Reitman or
No, literally, I saw Juno about a decade ago, and then I didn't see Jennifer's Body. I don't think anyone did, but
No. I don't think Jason Reitman directed that.
No, I thought that was on the list.
No.
He may have been like the producer.
I think he executive produced.
Oh, okay.
But Diablo Cody did write it. So.
Oh, maybe that's what she was the writer on it. Yeah, I didn't see that. Either way, doesn't matter.
Well, Jason Reitman was the executive producer of Whiplash, so that's like one of the first things that I see going down his list. And I believe I actually did see Thank You for Smoking. I think I actually saw that movie because Scarface, Two Faces in it. So
Scarface.
Yeah, Scarface is also in that movie too.
Yeah.
No, Aaron Eckhart is in that movie, and I think that was another. I think it was like a satirical thing about being like a positive role model for a tobacco company, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of I like how they kind of draw the line between, realistic approach a lot and then what people are kind of sort of dealing with right now. Anything that's satirical is always kind of you run that sort of like weird sort of gray area. So I think it's also pretty cool. So we are excited. We are going to give you a quick break. Go use the bathroom, grab a drink, and we'll stay tuned for a full review of Tully. Let me get back. See you soon.
Yes.
And we are back, and thanks for tuning in to the Down in Front podcast, official podcast of downinfrontpodcast.com. We are here. We are reviewing Tully, one of the newest movies. It's listed as a comedy. It's definitely more of a drama, directed by Jason Reitman, starring Charlize Theron, Mackenzie Davis, and a whole bunch of other cool, very, very interesting casted people. What we're going to be doing is that we're going to be breaking the actual review down in a few sections. So we're going to talk about, the acting and the casting, and then overall just have kind of a conversation about like how mental health is kind of being portrayed in the movie. And then we're going to talk about the twist. Not quite M. Night Shyamalan, but it was pretty damn close. So we're definitely going to be talking about that, and then we're going to give our conclusions and the wrap up. And because this beautiful man is back, of course, Mr. Mouth of the South is going to start us off. And Brylan, talk to me about like some acting, some casting, and things that you dug about this movie.
So I think overall, since this is a small cast, everybody did a really great job of playing their roles, especially Charlize Theron and Mackenzie Davis. Like, Mackenzie Davis's character does not work unless she's able to bring out this very energetic, not innocent, but precocious outlook on life, and is looking to be that unexpected caretaker. And that in her playing off of Charlize Theron, and Charlize Theron just looking beaten down and disheveled, and just you look at her and you see the grind of life pretty much in every scene. Having those two in a dichotomic stance with one another, it makes the movie work totally. And what their two characters go through is a substantial journey of just parenthood and what it means to be a mom in this story. But they also have some really great supporting characters. Ron Livingston, really haven't seen him around much, but it's cool to see him as this dad that, even though he says he cares and he goes to work and he does his job, seeing the exhaustion on his face, whether or not he can provide any more support for like a new child, even though they've definitely been down this road before. It's interesting to see how his character deals with that situation as well. And I wouldn't say he's necessarily being neglective, but it's more of just like, does he have any more energy or effort to put into this this journey you have to go through when raising a new child? And I also thought, which brother is it? Which Duplass brother is it? Nick?
Mark
Duplass. He plays a dick really well. And I always like seeing him in like kind of that dickish role, and he's definitely kind of like the other part of Marlo's character, like in that family, just that he kind of ran in his own direction and didn't really settle down until he was able to like afford the lifestyle of having multiple kids and having a wife that he could dote on and everything. So it's really interesting to see how he got to his point versus where Marlo is.
Legit, I can't not see Creep. Like him when he was just like, he's like, come into the like this weird creepy tiki basement, I thought it was a scene from Get Out too, honestly, with the whole tiki theme. But like the The tiki torches.
I know you're talking about tiki torches. That was like literally tiki though.
Honestly, if Jordan Peele steals that, I think he owes Down in Front podcast at least an executive producer role.
At least
minimum. But yeah, no, it's impossible to separate him playing that creepy. Like, I can only really see him as like the goofy comedy from The League, or just the guy from Creep that might whip his penis out.
I haven't seen Creep, so I'm glad I don't have that. I definitely seen The League, but I didn't. It was surprising, Brylan. I didn't get like from the Mark Duplass character who plays Craig, who was Marlo's brother. I didn't get the dick as much in this movie. I think his wife was definitely like. I didn't really like the tone of like what his wife was portraying. I think for sure she was a bitch. She was very condescending. It didn't seem like she liked Marlo or Drew's character at all. But at least with Craig's character played by Mark Duplass, I felt like it was more complex. And even in the moment of when they go into the tiki, he was like, hey, look, I'm right there with you. I'm sitting here. I'm trying to help you. I'm offering help. We grew up in this shit together and I wanted to get out of it, and it definitely felt like he had to work for it. And at this point, it's like, all right, well, this is my sister, so I can have like this different sort of like relationship with her. And so I can understand like some of the motivations, at least in he was only in like 2 scenes, spoiler. But at least in that scene that they were talking about at the dinner table, it was like, I'm not like flaunting like my wealth at you. It was more along the lines of, this is what I am now because I built myself up to that.
Yeah, and I don't mean to call him like a dick, like he's actually putting effort behind flaunting it in front of Marlo or her husband. I'm going to call him Peter. But what it is that he's gotten to that level, and his wife's at that level too, where they've created that bubble. And they know that bubble. And so when they talk about that bubble to others that aren't at that level, it comes off as very pretentious and stuff, because they're like, oh, why don't you just get a nanny or someone to watch after the kids? And they're like, do you see what I'm fucking dealing with? Because that's like the first reaction. And I think it's a very natural way of perceiving that. And so I think that was a really good job of them being able to show that, hey, even though you're at different economic stations of life, that y'all probably have more in common than you think. And I think the movie did a really great job of kind of exploring that along the way as well.
I think also one of the major themes, besides kind of what happens at the twist, but one of the major themes is missed communications. There was that great scene where Mark Duplass and his wife were in the hospital ready to go down the elevator, and he says that I just want my sister back. And so I think this movie does a great job from an unreliable narrator perspective of drawing you. You don't see what the characters really are saying. You see what certain people take them to mean. And so I don't think that intrinsically these characters are mean to each other, but they come off that way due to miscommunication and a little bit of an unreliable narrator. And so I thought that was really cool. That really brought it out. You're right, Brian, that like obviously different people in different social statuses are gonna miss that, but I think there was more there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also some good child actors in this movie. I want to get into Jonah in the next section a little bit more. So, Warren, I'm going to pass it off to you.
I'll definitely talk about Sarah.
About the kids.
So, Sarah is played by Leah Franklin. So she is the daughter, which is the first daughter of Marlo and Drew. And she was very different. She was kind of different, not very, because we'll talk about Jonah also. But she has glasses, and I think there was one kind of components that she's like very smart, but still very kind of shy. And even at her birthday party, she didn't really want to like kind of speak, like actually kind of sing the karaoke, but I think that she just did an absolutely kind of solid role throughout the entire movie, even kind of balancing the character of Jonah and balancing the character of Marlo too, especially seeing them all in that one car scene together when she's like trying to drive. Like that was the epitome. I kind of sort of think like if you would have showed somebody like a snippet of this scene, right? Or to tell people like, hey, you should check out this movie, or like what's one of the essence of this movie is just to see, like just show them that like 15-30 second car scene. But I think that's a very, very good, I think it's a very good storytelling. I think it was she's a great actress. I don't think I've seen her in anything else just yet. I looked at her IMDb. She only had like 2 or 3 other things. But it was something that, that right there, just like all the acting total, the cast was maybe 15-20 people max, but really we only seen like 4 or 5, maybe 6, and then she's definitely kind of one of them, and she definitely feeds off of what everybody else is kind of doing. And even her small, like kind of a couple lines like here and there, they were kind of throwaway lines at first, and then once you get to the part of the movie that we'll talk about a little bit later, like it starts making way more sense why she's saying some of this stuff. So definitely huge shout out to Leah Franklin. She was awesome. As a part of like all my other casting, I love anything to do with like a small cast. It's more intimate. You have these small casts in a small settings. And so the majority of the times that you're going to have these characters talking one-on-one or talking with a group of people, but it's never more than like 4 or 5 people at a time. You get a lot of this sense of, you get more character work. You start learning people more. You start to kind of understand what's actually kind of happening. And an example of this is that you can see Charlize Theron's character Marlo talking to the principal, right? And she just basically, we're not entirely sure like why she keeps saying like, but we love your family, but we love your family. And straight up, she calls her out was my brother donates. That's the only reason why I'm here, right? Yeah. Like let's cut the bullshit, So I like kind of scenes like that because you take a scene from, Marlo's character screaming at the teacher to then the next scene that she has is like giving her cupcakes and it's like, what the hell is going on with this woman sort of thing. So, but you see like through these small like beats, you see more and more of this character, mainly Marlo, because she's like the main character of it, of the story itself. And that's something that, I thoroughly enjoy watching and kind of seeing these kind of smaller casts. For sure. I love everything that we Bradley had talked about with even like Mackenzie Davis, and it was so interesting to see her kind of feed off of Marlo, and that all the way to the point where like she's like that at that point here, like you've never noticed that it's a quote unquote kind of gross scene, but like a pregnant woman has to be like kind of milked in a toilet, and that looks like it's a painful sequence. I'm like, that sucks, but man, that is like huge. That's a great friend right there. Like holy shit, like good on you. Yeah. That's something that you just don't see. There's a lot of stuff in this movie that you just don't see really anytime else, and they even had a montage of baby being born, crying, going on, and her spilling the milk and all the things that's going wrong with having a new baby. And it's not her first child, right? It's her third. And so now it's interesting to see damn, she did this twice already, now this is the third time, and that repetitious, like you can kind of feel that weight. So I like the fact that they even took the time to shoot a scene like Marlo has to pee on the toilet while she's in the hospital, unless they're not going to let her leave. And they take the moment, like a minute maybe out of the entire sequence to actually kind of show this, to see that this, I like what they're doing. I like how this was shot. I like that they have a bit of like a slice of realistic approach to, well, this is really the pregnancy. It's not really everything leading up to it. It's like after it and like how you're actually going to be living and how you're doing it. Obviously, none of us knows how being pregnant feels, but it definitely, it was a lot more enjoyable and also kind of difficult to watch at certain points. And I'm glad they kind of put that into the actual movie. Rylan?
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely right there with you that not only are those montage scenes that they do, are they like consistently just like dealing with a new human pooping and having to be fed and having to feed the other two as well because they can't support themselves yet. And Charlize is just able to like just show like hey, I probably haven't slept in 3 days and I haven't showered in a while. And just all those elements really bring you into that moment of this woman actually trying to raise her children in a very intense environment because there's 3 needy mouths that she needs to be fed. And I think one of those scenes that just like adds on to like that montage is like when she's driving to the school first time, she has to talk to the teacher and Jonah starts kicking her chair and Sarah's saying, can you get him to stop? And everybody starts screaming and it just kind of like gradually starts and then it escalates and then it escalates and then it escalates where you're there with her saying like, this is nuts. I don't know what to do with myself right now. Yeah. And I think that's like the daily feeling that pretty much every parent has, is especially if it's like first time parents, is like, how do I deal with this chaos? Because it is utter chaos dropped into your lap. Mm-hmm. But I think they do a really good job of just like trying to capture matter of fact moments in life really well. Well, I thought it was really awesome when Marlo and Tully drive out to New York and you're hearing just the bit parts of Cyndi Lauper's album, like in every step. So just going from wherever suburb around New York and then she's driving into Brooklyn and they do that unique, like, stop, let's go to the next song, let's go to the next song. So you can get that perception of time of them taking actually a driving trip, which I thought that was actually done really well. And it spoke a lot about just this needs to be as grounded as possible.
Can I expand on that? There's a lot of like really weird cuts in this. And I think that it went through to the central theme, one of the central themes that parenthood is ridiculous. And I never want to have children after seeing this movie. But I think it was, it was almost the opposite of Baby Driver, where Baby Driver was cut to a beat. Every single thing happened on the downbeat of the song, whereas this movie was just like, all right, slash it, on to the next scene. All right, let's let this linger for a second too long, and then cut it to the next scene. Like it felt really disjointed at times, but not in a bad way. Like, do
you think it was like more like chaotic?
Like like there was it wasn't cut to a rhythm. When they're doing the baby montage, it wasn't like, diaper, trash, twist, wah, diaper, like you could set like a diaper, diaper, This was like completely different. They seemed to like vary it up, which I thought was really cool after seeing, again, Baby Driver, Guardians of the Galaxy. What was the other big one that was just like completely cut to music?
Oh,
yeah, I forget. Star Wars. Yeah, even something as Star Wars, where you have a big majestic score. In this movie, you had a little bit of like radio music, and you had a couple little piano tunes in the background, but realistically, no real score to cut to. That's a good point, Warren. That like Star Wars, you cut to John Williams' score, and you have very big orchestral hits. At the pivotal points. This freeform. Make it up as you go along.
It was a lot of fun. I did enjoy like just the amount of fun that they just continually to kind of have with it in some of those sequences. And you're like, oh, I felt so glad for her. Like she finally has a night out. Yes, she's hanging out with her friend. That's pretty cool. And like the entire movie itself is just kind of like a roller coaster of emotions, which is awesome. So I definitely kind of give up kind of huge props for that. Anything else that we want to add before we move into the portrayal of mental health of this movie?
Let's do it.
Cool. So that's going to be, this is a topic that I kind of brought up for a little bit because I was very, very glad to see at least some of the difficult conversations that they were kind of bringing up and the stuff that they kind of put into the script. And Brylan, you had mentioned, you had talked about a little bit for Jonah. So definitely kind of expand upon that and like talk to me about like your thoughts on the portrayal of mental health here.
Yeah. So to me, there's like two big characters where they like kind of actually explore mental health in different varying ways. One is Jonah, who's definitely played very well by his by the actor who portrays him. I'm not sure what his name is, but he's like 7, 8 years old. And the character of Jonah, you might immediately just take a look at him and like, oh, he must be on the autism spectrum somewhere or anything. But he's so young that you really don't know or not. It could be that he's a late bloomer, or it could be more emotional rather than a psychological thing. And so there's a lot of different elements that they actually add to it, where you see it's more about like the social perception of, does this kid have an issue that needs more attention than other students have, versus if is he like a normal kid that just hasn't blossomed yet. That the way they talk about that with the teachers, how they're saying Jonah's quirky, he's a bright kid, and we just don't think this school is the right fit for him. We just don't have the facilities to help him out. It is heartbreaking to see that when the teacher is just telling them like, yeah, there's help out there. We can't provide it for you. You should just go and buy it somewhere. And even if Jonah does need all this special care and attention, it's definitely not the right message to send to the parent of that kid. Because especially Marlo, because she just had another kid and she's at her wit's end about everything, because she's not sleeping, she's not eating, she's not taking care of herself, and that's why she blows up at the principal. But they do a fantastic job of keeping that kind of ambiguous if Jonah does have an actual mental health issue or some type of learning disability, which I actually appreciated, because I have seen kids, and there's kids in my family too, where at 3 or 4, I've seen their parents look concerned about, is this kid going to be able to function with other kids? And then the next year, boom, there they are. And it's just, sometimes that's how kids develop. Not every kid's going to develop the same. And I think that's really neat, because they start you off with this very weird situation where Marlo is brushing Jonah like a dog. And when I first saw that, I was like, what the hell is this movie?
Yeah.
This is a weird, creepy scene.
Yeah, that's the opening moment. Basically, the opening scene of the movie is that. And that is how you are introduced to these characters, to say, am I missing it? So this, especially because I had no idea what this movie is about, I'm like, what kind of movie is Tully? I don't know what I'm for.
I thought we were in for Mother Part 2 for a couple minutes there. I was like, oh God.
No, not again.
But it's neat to see, like, this is, they go to explain this is something they found on YouTube that they say would help with kids with Jonah's needs, and you find out at the end, like, you know what? Jonah's like, hey, I just want to be here with you, Mom. I love you.
Oh my God.
You don't have to brush me. It's okay.
So I got a thought that I initially wrote down, and based on something I said earlier in this very podcast, I think I'm disagreeing with myself. I kind of didn't like the whole quirky thing. For me, like, 2 things. One, it seemed more autism spectrum, and I think I could have used a little bit more honesty. To me, when I was watching the movie, it seemed a little bit disingenuous to like call like an autistic person quirky. That seemed like a little bit insulting almost.
It was almost like a word chosen by school committee to say, like, if we run into these kids, what's the proper language we need to use?
But
so that I like that also, because you have Drew and his wife Elise, like, they use the same exact language because they don't know, and so that was I guess that the way that hang on, they just didn't know.
So part of that though, I think, goes back to the communication aspect that I was talking about earlier, where our narrator, again, unreliable narrator, our narrator was suffering some sort of psychotic break. she could have been replacing, and then by de facto in our ears replacing the word autism with quirky. It seems almost like a parent who's not quite like ready to accept that their child is going to be different and will require extra care, and so they hear quirky and fun. We like your family, not like your child has autism. One thing that really stood out to me was the scene where the principal was saying, "We can't have your son." To me, that's a perfectly reasonable conversation to have. She was just having it in like an ass backwards way, which again, I hated in the movie when I first saw it, but reflecting on what I previously said, because apparently my genius takes about an hour and a half to come out, it makes sense where the mother is not hearing the logical conversation of, our school is not set up for your son. Like, your son's special needs will require a specialized place to learn. And truthfully, I empathize with the principal. Like, if I had a child who's special needs, I'd want them in the best place, like, to learn and to better themselves, not to like arbitrarily pretend that, he was normal or she was normal. And so I think that we're getting a little bit more of that miscommunication and a little bit more of that unreliable narrator in those moments where quirky comes up instead of autistic, and also based on the prior where like autism, interestingly enough, diagnoses are on the rise. Realistically, not more people have autism. We're getting way better at diagnosing people with autism. And so like that call out where, Charlize Theron was having the like, do you think he's retarded? That is a very like age old thing where like autism wasn't misdiagnosed. And so if you had someone with special needs, they just automatically went to Down syndrome or some other sort of, mental inhibition. So I don't know. I think that more plays into it rather than like we're going to use a fun word.
Yeah, but my only concern about that one, Blewett, is just a couple thoughts, is the dialogue and the language that they gave that principal. They really kind of set her up. And this, I understand exactly what you mean. I like that concept of like unreliable narrator. I think we see that a lot, especially in like a lot of HBO shows and a lot of the shows that really get you into your head, kind of makes you think and kind of question like reality in total. My only thing is, if this school wanted to help out, they would probably have found like other ways to kind of provide like some sort of service besides saying your kid can't stay here. What's perfect for you? This option A is perfect. You can do this, you can do this, but we don't do that.
Well, they didn't even ask her if Jonah's been tested or not, which should have been like the first thing. And I think that makes the movie a lot better, is making Jonah's condition ambiguous. That is it growth and development phase for him, or is it something where he is on a spectrum of autism or any type of a need like that? Because it's something where people race to assume there's a problem where there may not even be a problem. And it just might be, it's a matter of time for it to work itself out.
Well, I think this gives us another sort of example of when she finally enrolled Jonah in the other school, and Jonah's like having a bit of an episode of like the toilets flushing and it's kind of like basically freaking out and kind of screaming. You have this random teacher that it was, again, super ambiguous. We don't know if he was a counselor or anything at all. He could have been like a math teacher or a substitute. Like, it doesn't matter. You have this guy just shows up and talks to Jonah about how to like, let's be a tree. Let's take a couple breaths. Let's be a tree. Let's kind of do a bit of a yoga pose to kind of calm his nerves and bring all the energy in and just kind of blow it all away. And that completely calmed him down to the point where that looks like that's all what was needed for that time when he's having those particular kind of episodes. So I liked that they at least kind of added that into there just as a different level of, all it takes was just a little bit of time, like maybe changing up the way that you may think to teach your son, right? Because this is her first time having a son. So I thought that was another example, another a good way of just showing that there's a lot of different ways. Definitely keep everything ambiguous, right? Like it doesn't need to be anything diagnosed. I like how they kept it all ambiguous, because what was going to happen is that people who watch this movie, we're then going to put our thoughts into it. It's like, well, it could have been this, it could have been this, and that's what makes it way more impactful as the viewer of this movie.
Yeah.
I will say, the actor playing Jonah was awesome, regardless of your interpretation. Yep. Like, that kid killed it.
Yes. He should have been in Iron Man 3.
And Jurassic World.
And so many movies. God damn it, Ty Simpkins. What else do we have about like the overall portrayal of mental health here before we go on to the twist?
Well, the other character that they kind of like explore with mental health is Marlo herself. So she starts having these dreams about mermaids and underwater and stuff like that. And we'll get into the twist in a bit, but it's interesting to kind of explore that is being stressed out from being a parent. Is that a mental health issue that needs addressing and stuff? That being a parent is a huge undertaking, especially with all the responsibilities are to it, not just feeding and changing, but making sure everybody's fed and making sure everybody gets to school, making sure dinner is ready when people get home, and making sure that the house does not fall to pieces while you're doing all of this. And that level of exhaustion that Marlo takes herself through, I mean, it does cause some like delusions for her. And I'll honestly say, I'm not quite sure what the whole symbolism of the mermaid's about. I mean, I don't know if it's like yearning for beauty and yearning to feel a different way, or you're being a different person.
Is that a Zoolander reference?
No.
Water is the essence of beauty.
Water is the essence of moisture.
Essences. Well, I mean, it's postpartum depression that you're talking about. Postpartum depression is the thing that you're talking about. Yeah.
Because I'm definitely not the person to explore that in any in-depth way, but I found it to be a very interesting journey for Marlo's character.
Yeah, I mean, so this is another thing that I really enjoyed them doing. Now, I think it's a bit of a storytelling or a couple of mechanics of, we have some foreshadowing that happens because she has a couple of these different sort of visions, right? She has this dream of like, she has a sense of, she feels like she's drowning, right? So she has that. Then she also have a sense of, she feels like there's multiple Jonahs and there's just too much that she can actually kind of handle for that time. And then she goes and kind of almost like she's driving a car and the car gets into an accident, right? And that was one of her dreams. So we start seeing these things. And I think one of you guys talked about it before, of like it starts escalating, right? Like the sense of drowning, the sense of being out of control, the sense of like losing it. And so I absolutely loved that there's everything going against her. Nothing's going right. And then the moment she's trying to like, you know what, I'm going to like, fuck it. I'm going to do something myself. I'm going to go for a run. Right. And she's like running. She's like exercising. She's trying to kind of make herself feel good. She's like trying to race the younger lady. And I love the fact that she kind of sits down. She was kind of tired. She kind of feels good. She's like sat down. She was like, yeah, this is milk. I milk, like fucking deal with it. And I was like, fuck, thank you for putting that in because that's something that we don't see. That's uncomfortable, right? Lactation is like an uncomfortable thing that people don't talk about. And again, they literally gave us that time. They gave us that moment to really explore, like, how are women actually feeling, right? And this is like a snippet, right? But how women are actually feeling sometimes during this postpartum depression. Like, how are they actually feeling? What's going on? If it's just them and it feels like they have the weight of the world on their shoulders, and what else do you have? Charlize Theron does a crazy, crazy, amazing job, especially after the conversation they had with the principal of, I felt like for sure she was going to flip and hit one of the kids or something bad was going to happen, but she held it together, and even so, like she finally kind of caved and kind of called that night nanny. She called Tully over, and she ended up kind of coming, and it was still kind of like an awkward sense of what the heck was happening there. And I feel like we actually haven't talked about Tully, but I'm sure we will in a second. Yeah. But I think I'm just glad again that they go there. They talk about the uncomfortable moments of things that people don't really talk about. You know, we talked about mental health. We talked about the acting. We talked about like the physicality of the sexual moment here, and I'm glad they did that here.
Yeah, they also have a really cool scene with Marlo and Tully talking about Peter from Office Space. And like, is he a good husband? Is he a good dad? And she comes to the conclusion that, yeah, he's good because he's going to work, he's doing his job, and he's making sure that we have a roof over our head.
Really? I took that as the other way.
I'm going to put a pin in that.
I think
if we can talk about that next, the only reason why is I have a different approach from what was happening there. I agree with you, agree with both of you more on Blewett section. But I can tell you what in a second.
But it's interesting because you do have that whole scene with her former roommate at the beginning. And her former roommate and her, it seemed like they had probably more than a roommate relationship. At some
I think
point.
she says it though. She said she loves Sarah. She was like in love with her.
Well, I mean, they say they love her, but I mean,
no, I think she said she was like in love with her when she was talking with Tully too.
Oh, okay. So they were going back to a previous relationship. So that's even an interesting choice that her character makes, is that she decides to settle down with a guy and have a family and kids and everything, even though that she obviously her sexuality is kind of more open than maybe her husband's is. And that when she meets with Tully, that she starts to kind of like explore that back again and say, is that worth venturing down again?
But
I never left satisfied that they were in a good place in their relationship. Like it still seemed like his apology was kind of half-assed at the end of like I should have seen it. And it felt like it was more of just like, you know, I need to keep on doing this because I'm stable. Even that scene when they were talking about the relationship, there was a ton of hesitancy in her voice. Like she was like, yeah, you know, it didn't sound like a convincing, like, you know, I love this man and he's the father of my children.
It was a difference between like love and compassion and a choice that was made because it was safe. And I think they also mentioned a couple times of babies weren't planned and they had to kind of like work around that.
No, the last one wasn't planned. The first two were.
Okay. Okay.
But
that's why.
But yeah, it just seemed like a stereotypical like loveless marriage. Like they made it 15 years, had a couple kids, and you know, it was just that was the thing you did. Is you woke up next to that person. Like they even spun it like he was a workaholic for a job that wasn't that good. Now, granted, they had a Hollywood house, so that was, you know, paled in comparison, but way bigger than anything any of us are living in. But you know, it seemed like he was never there, but also struggling in his career. You know. Also, one other thing, the whole video game thing was, I thought, especially poignant, because that's the society we live in now. I thought that was a really cool modern adaptation. The thing that pissed me off, though, this is totally a sidebar, the game he was playing was Gears of War, and he was playing it with a freaking PlayStation controller. I honestly was, like, raging in the middle of this movie of just, like, you can't, it's such a, like, you literally, how does not, you need
Call of Duty.
You need one, you need something cross-platform. How does not one PA be like, yeah, that game, that doesn't exist with this controller?
Just play Overwatch.
Yeah, right. Well, I do want to go back to this one thing here because I think a lot of this, a lot of the film really makes a statement of like how bad of a father that he was and how bad of a provider that he was. Just because like you go to work and you provide like money and like you provide like a financial backing, that doesn't make you a good father. Like just like for the simplest effects of she's literally doing, and I don't think there was like literally one moment I can see in this entire movie that Drew's character was like helping out Sarah, his daughter, out with homework. Other than that, in the movie, you didn't see him do anything. He was able to do stuff. You didn't see him do anything. And he was literally, that was like the cadence that was happening of things would happen. She's taking care of the baby. He's upstairs playing video games, and he goes to sleep. He never wakes up during the time that she's going down, tending to the baby back and forth, back and forth. He's literally always asleep. Wakes up in the morning, he's gone out of work, and she's like kind of doing the same thing over and over during it while she's on maternity leave, by the way, because she does have a job. So I'm glad they at least kind of talk about that. So that at least made it definitely feel like, God, this dude's not very good. And I'm there was a bit of an ownership like later on in the movie of where, he did feel bad. Now should have been more of an apologetic, like you should have felt more about what was happening at that time. Oh, for sure. But they're trying to keep it realistic, I think. And I like the fact that it wasn't something crazy, like over the top, him like apologizing to everything. Right. So
yeah,
I think that was a lot that I was getting from this.
It's not like he was absentee or anything. He definitely came home, kissed Mia, said hi to his kids, asking them how's it going. He even has his moments with Jonah and stuff. And they play off like his lack of being a father really subtly for the most part, which I think actually serves the movie really well. Mm-hmm. There are a couple moments where it is like just blatant, like, oh, of course he doesn't really understand why he's needed in the middle of the night for the feedings, because he just says like, well, you have the boobs that make milk. And yeah, it plays off like a joke, but then at the same time, it also has this underlying seriousness is that, hey, if she has to do this, be there with her too, because
absolutely, in
case something bad happens, you're there for her.
I mean, I have a lot of friends right now that are going through their first and second child, and they both are doing that, whether it's the feeding, whether it's the getting up, but like they're like, whether like neither one of them are drinking, right? They're both are doing that because it's both people that has to be, and that like it has to be like a balance. There has to be there has to be a balance. There has to be like both parties that has to contribute to this. And I was definitely feeling I'm glad that he had that moment kind of sort of coming back, but it made it a bit more obvious of like, wow, he's not doing what he should be doing as a father and as a provider. He just like, again, I think the video game kind of really highlighted it because he's literally doing that every night. That was kind of frustrating.
I think the straw I think the straw that broke the camel's back is when he walks in and goes, "Oh, cold pizza," and like just the way he delivers that line and her reaction to that is just like, dude, you need to run before she just slaughters you in front of the kids.
And like you can see how she looks like right after that, right? Oh man, and that scene was so cringeworthy good though. Again, this is why I love this is why I love this movie, is because as that happened, Jonah spills his drink on Marlo, and so she has to take off her shirt because it's sopping, and then Sierra delivers a line and says, "Mommy, what's wrong with your body?" Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh, that's why I was like, damn, that is like eviscerating a new mother to that her child just says that, and that's tough.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, let's talk about the twist. So I feel like in the twist, I feel like in this section we're probably going to be talking about a lot about Tully, but the biggest thing that we find out in this movie is Tully is not real.
Tully is real.
No, Tully was definitely not real.
Not real at all.
Tully is Marlo. And Marlo.
Yes, exactly. So we see that Tully is a fictional sort of representation, visualization, whatever you want to say, of. Now we've kind of see and kind of know that she was actually Marlo when she was younger. That was Marlo, just like now visualize that this is everybody who I wanted to be by like more market on like the way that she looks, her body, her clothes, the style of music she listens to like literally everything, the type of food that she likes to. There was something else. She's like, oh, I have that too. Oh, I have that too. So that was like the biggest thing. Now, before we kind of talk about unpack that a bit more, did any of you guys pick up on this? And if so, when did you pick up on it?
I would say I did not pick up on it at all. So once they reveal it, I'm just like, I was floored. I was just like, wow, they really pulled that, and this movie means so much more than I thought it does.
Right?
But my big question of this is, and I don't know if it's like just a matter of like how the movie was plotted or the editing of it. Was there ever a night nanny?
No.
Or
No.
was it?
So
Or was it that Charlize Theron just said, "Hey, I hired a night nanny. She burned the
She had
candle at both ends."
yes. So I think the two things about there is
Because
again,
they do establish that there is a night nanny service. That,
Right.
yes.
They also had a
Mark Duplass's wife.
they had a
But
great
there's two things
scene
that happen.
with the Carly Rae Jepsen where what's it called? Duplass was like, "Oh, I'm glad she like called the night nanny," and Peter was just standing there like smiling, just like not saying like yes, not saying no, just like, kind of smiling, and that was a super ambiguous moment.
It's the other way around. So the Drew character asks, "Oh." He asked, "Oh yeah, so we have like this night nanny," and then the Duplass character goes, "Oh, she called him."
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, I got it
yes.
backwards then.
I picked
Oh
up on
yeah,
that.
exactly. And so when that happened, that was one of the first lines. I was like, "Oh, son of a bitch!" But I didn't pick up on it at that time at all.
yeah.
I didn't pick it up until they were in the bar, and so that's when things started. Like once it started going off the rails. That was a car crash joke. So when things start to go bad for this, I was like, something's not right here. Why does she know so much about? Because when the bartenders were interacting, when the people were interacting, they were only interacting with Marlo in the bar, and so that's why I was like, something's not quite right here. I don't know exactly what it is. And then we see that she gets into the crash, she goes into the water, and she has like that vision of Marlo as a mermaid that's like unbuckling her seatbelt and like floats her up, and then she wakes up in the hospital.
Yeah.
So that was when I started like kind of putting a couple things sort of together. But then again, we had talked about the fact that the Peter character, the Drew character, he never went down to check on the baby or anything during the night, so he would have no idea if the night nanny was there or not. So she was basically doing everything at that time, and there's a couple of flashes too, but the night nanny was never there.
Because I thought the whole kinky diner maid scene, that just threw me for a loop where you see Tully get on top of him and start like necking at him and stuff. And then the next day he's like, "Yeah, that night nanny, she knows her stuff." And I'm like, did they just do this? Did they just have some weird three-way that happened? And so that's like where the movie started to just get kind of where I started to think about there needs to be something else to this movie, because something's not right here. Because regardless of who Drew is and stuff, he doesn't seem like the cheating type.
Yeah, that was out of left field. I will say this about the ending. So I didn't watch a single trailer for this. I legitimately didn't even know who was in it. I pulled a full Warren. I literally, he's like, "We're seeing Tully. That's what we're next one we're doing." I had nothing. I knew the runtime because I knew when I'd be back here for you guys to record this podcast. That was it. And so I honestly like kind of hurt a little for something I'll probably talk about in the wrap up, but like that, I had no idea what the tone of this movie was, and I was like awkwarded out the entirety of the movie. And then when that scene hit, it was like, oh wow. Like I kind of didn't like the whole rest of the movie until it hit, and then thinking about every single one of those moments like in a different light was like, yep, that's what that's about.
Yeah.
I will say this. Hang on one sec. Oh, it froze. Oh, I got it. So a couple of things. I loved how they introduced it at first. The first night that the nanny comes over, Tully, they talk about like Marlo breastfeeding Mia, And he says, oh no, she kind of just handed her to me and then creeped away into the shadows. And I thought that was like a masterful description on how these things start. You know, we as humans are standing on this like precarious little pinnacle that any little push from any little side can kind of cause us to tumble. And this movie really shows that. And so, but it never quite manifests itself immediately. You have to kind of mentally make yourself like, oh no, this is normal. Like you have to slowly gain this acceptance and have this like issue come out of darkness and into light. Which I again, thinking back on those scenes that I thought were super weird and super awkward was freaking awesome.
I thought something that was really neat about Tully is she always asked permission before doing something.
Yeah.
That was like one of her aspects.
I also loved how they had this is small, but I love the cane callback. The whole like, oh, are you going to murder everyone? And I walk away with a cane. And at the end of the movie, she was walking around with a cane. Two quick other things. I thought the mirror work in this was freaking awesome. So there was a couple scenes, specifically when they said like, oh, the baby's like part of you, like you'll have cells remaining in you for the next couple of years. They had this one thing where Charlize Theron was behind the car, you know, freaking out after just freaking out on the principal. And she walks around, and I don't know how they quite did this, but you see the baby in the bottom left-hand corner. It's like a mirror of her mirror, and you see her walking around but still see the kid in it. There was one more that I can't remember right now, and then the last one was one of the last scenes in the movie where she's standing in front of a mirror, and it's tilted at an angle so that one side of her face makes her seem younger and the other side is like older, and she tilts it at one point. It kind of like fluctuates between the two as she had as a character through the movie, which I was like, that's freaking cool. And then I think besides that mirror work, I think the last thing was like that. This is more of a personal note, has nothing to do with the movie, it has all to do with Mike Blewett, is that I am smack dab in the middle of these age groups. So Tully's, what is she, 26, and then Marlo is 40. And it definitely was like this weird self-reflection of like, I'm not 26 anymore. I'm not going out to bars. I'm not like living life every single night. You know, I got a job and responsibilities and damn it, you know, stuff to take care of. But also I'm not like a parent with a couple kids and, you know, a midpoint through a career. And so it was this weird existential, like while the credits were rolling of being like, what am I? like I'm not a partier, but I'm like, and I can see that in my past. Who am I?
I got better. What am I?
I'm not like the partier. I can see that in my past, and I can also like see glimpses of like having a midpoint in a career and like potentially other stuff, you know, down the line where like, but I'm definitely not there. It was weird. And that twist in the way that they conversed about it after the fact was kind of a mind bender.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this movie, I'm glad that this is why I appreciate you guys for doing this, is that I think one of the first things out of the movie that I finished this, and I saw this kind of pretty late. I thoroughly enjoyed movies because this one weighed on me for a good long time. I remember I literally walked home, didn't listen to music, really wanted to chew on this, kind of went to sleep, woke up the next day. I went to physical therapy, and at my physical therapy, it was like I was doing my exercises, and all I can think about was this movie, to the point where my physical therapist goes, "Are you all right, Warren?" I was like, to be honest, no. I just saw this movie, and it's not bumming me out, but at the same time, again, like Blewett, I try to like really kind of get myself personally in this mindset of to think about, you know, past, present, future, and just about anything and everything all grouped into one. So it was interesting. He was like, "Oh, should I go see it?" And I said, "Well, he was a brand new father. He has a 3-week-old baby." And I said, "Absolutely not." He's like, "Well, should my wife go see it?" I was like, "Probably not right now. I would like wait a little bit, like maybe down the line." He's like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "Yeah, I would wait a little bit."
Until the kid's 18.
Yeah, I don't know about 18, right? I would like wait until the kid's like 2 or 3 or something, but we'll see. But This movie, just personally, like, again, this is kind of the same thing. We're all around the same age, Blewett, Brylan.
Yep.
And we're all between the age of 26 and 40. So that also got that same sense of it made me think a lot about, my mother had like 5 children. And again, this is another thing that kind of really kind of spoke to me, especially about the twist, right? It was because personally for me, my mom having 5 children, she was a single parent. So
wow.
What the hell was she thinking of after me being the 5th child, right? What the hell was she thinking about doing half of that time? And we were all within like a year of each other. So when I'm 1, the other one's 2, 3, and, go on, so on and so forth. So this is why I appreciate it. Like, show me these difficult moments that I'll never have the opportunity to step into somebody else's shoes. This is why I like movies like that. Show me these moments. Show me these people's pain as much as you can paint a picture of it, so I can at least get a new perspective and gain. Fuck, this is what women go through. Period. Right? Like, this is what they go through. This is how they actually kind of have to deal with life. This is how they just don't know how to like actually say this out loud. And this is why I appreciate these sorts of movies, is they show me the difficult things that I'm not going to shy away from. That's something I need to watch it. Now, granted, it's a movie. Yeah, of course it's a movie. There's a bunch of documentaries, a lot of other things to do it. Oh, of course, I'm not going to knock anything's out there. This just so happened to be a movie about a time in which everything else about superheroes, right? Everything is about superheroes, and everything else that we see inside the theater around, like, approaching this summer blockbuster movies. And now we get this film that arguably has made me think more than any other movie I've seen all year. Black Panther a little bit for one character, but this takes the cake on how this movie chooses to make me think.
Yeah. And the whole awesome thing about Tully being Tully is that it kind of shows the other side of the parenting, while you see Marlo go through the struggle and the grind and the terribleness. Just being the utter exhaustion and chaos of parenting. And then you have Tully, who is kind of there to remind her, like, well, you've done all this tough work because this is the joy you get out of it. This is why it's unique. Even though this may seem like the mundane, boring thing to do in life, where you have routine and you have this constant in your life of raising kids and being a parent, that this is what comes out of it. You get cupcakes with Minions or Sesame Street characters on it that you can send to school and see all the kids have a great time. You get to know a little bit more about, like, who Jonah is and what type of person Jonah's going to end up being. Or Sarah, you get to help her out with being able to get the confidence to sing a song in front of her friends and stuff. And
love that.
And it's really cool and this movie can only work with these two characters going through this journey together. And it's really cool to see that, regardless if you think Tully is fully like a manifestation that Marlo made to kind of cope with the struggle of parenting, that it's also Tully's there to send a great message that parenting's worth that struggle as well.
Yeah, there's one thing I did want to kind of bring up before we talk about the conclusion here is that conversation that we were having before. And the reason why I wanted to kind of wait until this section was I think when, Marlo and Tully are talking when they're hanging out in their jacuzzi, like sipping on the sangria, there is a kind of a conversation. And I think she was talking directly to Tully, trying to convince herself of why she was still in love with this Drew, the father. And she talked about how much that was safe. And Tully was reminding her of, like, it's safe, but, like, do you have any passion for it at all or anything? And I think it was just more along the lines of, like, just self-doubting. Like, once you get into a state of, like, the depression that deep, right, that you have, like, a physical manifestation of, like, the stressful components that's happened to you, you're going to tend to doubt everything. Like, I'm going to doubt the very existence of myself in every decision that I've made in my past, none of that stuff is going to feel like it's going to be worth it. And so I like that conversation. We didn't know at the time, right? But I was like, oh, she's trying to like convince herself, right? Like you can convince yourself that you're in love with this person and this person's kind of perfect for you. But really, are you convincing yourself now, especially to the point where you're talking to yourself? Like you're actively talking to yourself, trying to convince yourself that this person's like, this husband's like the perfect fit for you when you know that you're not really getting the emotional support as much as you necessarily would need. And so I enjoyed like going back right now that we know that's one of my favorite sequences, just thinking like as a metaphysical or like thinking outside the box sort of scenario of like, fuck, that's tough to be like, man, like it, it's a sense of like feeling trapped and she has nothing that she can do.
Yeah. And I get now why she's watching gigolos all the time is that, I mean, Drew said, like, even Drew was admitting they haven't had sex for months.
Oh,
and she needed like just some outlet to either feel a little freakiness or be a little wild in her otherwise normal life, which they definitely show parenting is not a normal life at all. And so that's why she's watching something as salacious as gigolos every night.
I mean, I do that now though. Is that weird?
Well, I guess it depends on who you are.
Perfect. So, in conclusion, let's talk about Tully. Rylan, tell me like some lasting thoughts that you have here.
I love this movie because it's not just about a neglected parent. It's not just about mental health and how people perceive it from the outside looking in. It's not just about the struggles of parenting. It's about all those things all put together. And it definitely tells a very deep, meaningful story that I'm sure a lot of mothers can relate to, but I think that it actually has some appeal that I think anybody should watch this. And I think it's one of the best movies I've seen so far. It's definitely in my top 3 for this year for right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that one for like literally everything he had. Blew it.
Yeah, so I really did like this, basically because of the ending. I couldn't stand it before that. I will say this though, I am watching trailers. Your plan is stupid. I legitimately knew nothing about this movie, and I, from the outset, had no idea what this was about. I knew it was like an indie flick, and so I was like, is it going to be a horror indie flick? Is it going to be a weird Darrenofsky indie flick? Is it going to be like a comedy and just like hip and stuff? I had no idea, and so I kept on like watching and be like, am I supposed to be laughing? Is that funny and I'm just not getting it? Is this scary and I'm just not scared? Like I had no pretense on how I should kind of feel about it. And so I'm never doing that again. I'm 100% watching the trailers because at least one to get an overall look of feel on it.
I really dug the trailer to this movie though, because all it was the cold pizza scene and then the door knocks and then you see Tully. And that's it.
Oh, interesting. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I like it that you don't watch trailers because then that gives you the most honest approach of how you see something, and that's I think, right, that's what truly defines you like as a person and how you're perceiving the information that's right in front of you. So you can agree to disagree, of course, but
I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
Also, like feeling uncomfortable in like movies, not literally uncomfortable like people talking in the movie theater, but like uncomfortable about some of the stuff that I'm watching because it's either new or I haven't seen it before or I've never thought about it before. So if you provide something that I haven't seen before, I'm gonna feel uncomfortable, quote unquote, but I'm gonna like, this is kind of new to me, but I want to like learn together. And this movie kind of puts me on that approach of like, I'm like learning as I'm experiencing. And I'm like, this is tough. And it's a complete raw emotion at that point. That's probably why I tend to cry a lot of movies. I cried in this one. So there you go. My lasting thoughts would be, love this movie. Ditto a lot, like almost everything that Brylan said. As of right now, this is going to go down and like definitely like one of my top 3 movies of the year so far. it's probably going to go down as like my top movie. I'm probably going to find myself kind of watching this again at some point, like later on.
Yeah.
This is like a movie, like if a Big Fish is kind of like a feel good movie of like to help me kind of think sometimes, this is going to be a movie that I'm like, man, this kind of gets me back into like my mind and also kind of helps me think a little bit. And, you know, I'm glad that this movie came out the same week as Mother's Day. You know, and though it's like a darker premise for some strange reason, still I'm not sure why it's called a comedy drama. You know, as a darker premise that it is, it does give you the sense and kind of appreciation for parents, for mothers, for everybody that's out there. So kudos to them for kind of doing that. And I'm just glad the fact that, you know, for me, it looks like it asks a question of, you know, if you need help, right? Sometimes people don't know how to ask for help. Sometimes people don't realize that they need to ask for help. Sometimes help is not even available. But there's two sides to it, right? If you are the mother in the scenario, you know, don't be afraid to be weak. Don't be like, just because you have to ask for help doesn't mean that you're a weak person. And if you're the father in the scenario or the partner in this scenario, don't be afraid to, you know, probe and see if that person needs help or just help them out even without asking, right? Like there's parents and there's things that's bigger than like the children itself, and people has to be able to try to step up for each other and definitely kind of support each other for whatever that actually happens itself. And, you know, a lot of this stuff could have been avoided possibly, right? Some of the stuff could have been at least avoided if Drew, the father character, would have been stepping in and supported, even in the sense of like when he's playing video games, or at least like being tired and exhausted in the entire scenario. So that's like my lasting thoughts.
Yeah. One last thing I would add is that I like that Jason Reitman does this thing where he doesn't give you a tidy ending. He basically is showing you this is step one. He's not telling you, oh, everything's hunky-dory right now. It's like, all right, step one is the next morning, help make lunch, help with the diaper changing and holding the baby and everything. Mm-hmm. That's not the solution. That's just the beginning of that journey.
Well, and it was funny. She even mentioned that, you know, Drew helps makes lunch. Like, oh, what's the nice things about Drew? He helps makes lunch, and that's something that she was talking to Tully. Did anybody else get nervous when she was making the lunch and she put it in her headphones? And I'm like, but you can't hear that baby crying though.
Oh, I took that the other way. Nah. I kept on waiting
I took it as she's a pro.
Oh, okay.
I took that as she's gonna stab him, because I was still waiting for the horror movie to come out. And I was just like, oh, that dude is done. She had that big old knife. I will say this, again, going back to the way it's framed, you didn't see him making lunch or like caring for the kids until she was somewhat healed of that. So we can make the assumption that it was happening, just the narrator didn't see it. Brian, you also raise a good point, and I think this is a PSA to everyone out there listening to us. Ryan Dowd, get help if you need it. But also mental health it's not a one-stop fix all. It's a process, and every day is a new step. Tomorrow will be another step. The day after that is going to be a third step. And so I think you're right, Warren, where like if we can start having this conversation and start healing ourselves and taking those processes, you'll come out of it a better human being. Ask for help, get help from professionals, get help from your friends, and keep on doing it every single day. You know,
absolutely, because everything's gonna be worth it in life. Life itself,
exactly,
is worth it.
Yes,
and we are the Down in Front podcast, and this ends our review of Tully, directed by Jason Reitman. Brylan, where can people find more of your work on the interwebs?
You can find me being a little bit older and wiser on Twitter at Bryland, BRILUND. You can also find me posting many movie reviews on Instagram at I am Bryland, and I'm back in Boston, so the Down in Front Games cast will be back soon. Now you want to just flesh out some details, get some fancy new imagery going for it, maybe even the new theme song. I'll talk to Blewett about that.
Ooh.
But when I do return, it'll be twitch.tv/Down in Front Podcast is where you can find our gaming fun that we have.
I'm excited. We should grab lunch on Wednesday.
Yes.
Blew It, the Shredder. Where can people find more you work out there on a bulletin board on a coffee shop in Boston?
Yeah, you can find me in a street corner playing on my noose. It kind of looks like my anus. It's a little bit bigger with a big old hole in the middle, but Did I use that joke last time? I honestly don't remember.
Y'all should open for Keytar Bear.
Oh man, that'd be good.
No, that guy has actual talent. Also, if you want to reach out to me individually, you can go to watch Jesse Rand pump breast milk at ymail.com.
Terrible. You're not even trying anymore.
Yeah, it's like you could Skype in. It's just Jesse Rand pumping breast milk.
Oh, hey guys. Is he pumping his own breast milk?
And welcome to the Down and Pump podcast.
Noise. And we are the Down in Front podcast. Definitely go check out more of our work. Literally everything and anything that you would like from us, even our bios and all of our links is going to be at downinfrontpodcast.com. So definitely go check that out. You can find us just about any sort of platform you can think of. So facebook.com/downinfrontpodcast and Twitter @_DIFP. We're going to be on Patreon. So people who definitely want to help us out, do you like what we do here? We're going to be pushing out like early episodes and pushing out bonus episodes and bonus content on our Patreons. So definitely go check that out. It's patreon.com/downinfrontpodcast. We have a bunch of awesome music and themes that's coming out, and Blew It has been absolutely killing it on our SoundCloud. So definitely check that out and search for us on SoundCloud. That's also on downinfrontpodcast.com. Thank you so much for kind of hanging out with us so much. We will be back sometime next week. We're not entirely sure. Oh, we're probably going to review Deadpool.
Yes, Deadpool.
Yeah, so definitely check out for our next review on Deadpool. And we will say thank you so much for hanging out with us. And a special thank you for everybody, all of our listeners who actually made us and gave us the ability to record our 100th episode. That is still up right now on iTunes and Google Play Store and everywhere. So anywhere you can search for us, Down in Front Podcast. Thank you so much for our listeners. Thank you so much for everything else. And we are out, and we will see you soon.
Bye.
Yo, how is the original release date not Mother's Day weekend?